Emirates Flight 521 was a routine passenger service between Thiruvananthapuram, India, and Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Operated by a Boeing 777-300, the flight carried 282 passengers and 18 crew members on board. The aircraft, registered as a 6 EMW, was a reliable workhorse in the airline's fleet, known for its efficiency and long-haul capability. On August 3, 2016, the jet departed as scheduled, cruising through the skies without incident. At the controls were two experienced pilots. The captain, a seasoned aviator with thousands of flight hours, had flown extensively with Emirates. The first officer, though younger, was equally competent and well-trained in handling the wide-body aircraft. Together, they formed a professional team tasked with safely delivering their passengers to Dubai. The journey itself was uneventful. The aircraft climbed to cruising altitude, where it maintained a steady course toward the Arabian Gulf. The passengers settled into the flight, some watching in-flight entertainment, others napping or chatting with their seatmates. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, offering refreshments and ensuring everyone remained comfortable. With clear skies ahead, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. As the aircraft neared its destination, the pilots prepared for landing at Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest aviation hubs in the world. Air traffic controllers provided instructions for their approach, guiding them toward runway 12L. The airport was bustling with activity as flights from around the world arrived and departed in quick succession. The Boeing 777 descended smoothly, its landing gear deployed, and the pilots aligned the aircraft with the runway. Inside the cockpit, the crew followed standard procedures, communicating efficiently as they prepared for touchdown. The approach was normal, with no apparent signs of trouble. The aircraft gently descended through the final few hundred feet, with passengers gazing out their windows, seeing the Dubai skyline in the distance. The sensation of descending toward the ground signaled that they were moments away from landing. However, as the wheels touched the runway, the aircraft bounced slightly, an occurrence that can happen due to various factors, including speed, wind conditions, or pilot input. In response, the crew initiated a go-around, a standard maneuver used when a landing attempt needs to be aborted. In such situations, pilots typically increase engine power, climb back into the sky, and attempt another landing once conditions are stabilized. The decision to go around was made swiftly, but a crucial error occurred. Instead of fully advancing the thrust levers to generate the necessary power for a climb, the engines remained at idle. This meant the aircraft was losing speed instead of gaining altitude. Within seconds, the situation became critical. The Boeing 777, one of the world's most advanced commercial aircraft, was capable of handling such maneuvers with ease, provided the correct procedures were followed. Unfortunately, the pilots did not apply the required thrust in time. The massive aircraft, now too low and too slow, had no option but to return to the ground, but this time in an uncontrolled manner. What had begun as a normal approach had now turned into a high-risk situation. The plane's descent rate increased rapidly, and the cockpit warning systems alerted the pilots to the danger. They tried to react, but there was no time to recover. The aircraft slammed onto the runway, hitting the surface hard. The impact caused structural damage, and the right engine separated from the wing. The force of the crash landing triggered an immediate emergency. Sparks ignited fuel vapors, leading to a fire that spread quickly across the fuselage. Smoke began filling the cabin, and passengers, now in shock, had only moments to react. The crew, trained for emergencies, sprang into action, directing everyone toward the exits. Outside, airport emergency services rushed toward the burning aircraft. Fire trucks and rescue teams mobilized instantly, preparing to battle the flames and assist in the evacuation. Inside, flight attendants fought against time, opening the doors and deploying the inflatable slides. Passengers scrambled to escape, some stumbling, others frozen in fear. Despite the chaos, the crew remained calm and authoritative, shouting commands to keep people moving. Some passengers attempted to retrieve their luggage, further delaying the evacuation, but the staff urged them to leave everything behind. The focus was survival. Every second counted. As the last of the passengers made their way down the slides, smoke continued to billow from the jet. Firefighters worked tirelessly to control the blaze, but the intensity of the flames posed a serious challenge. Tragically, in the process of trying to contain the fire, one firefighter lost his life, a reminder of the dangers these professionals face in their line of duty. A catastrophe had been narrowly avoided. The survival of all 300 passengers and crew was nothing short of a miracle. The aftermath of the crash left investigators searching for answers. What had caused the failed go-around? Why had the engines remained at idle? The answers would come later, but for those on board, one thing was certain. They had lived through an experience they would never forget. The flight that had started as a routine journey had turned into a test of survival, proving once again that in aviation, even the smallest mistakes can have devastating consequences. The moment Emirates Flight 521 struck the runway, chaos erupted inside the cabin. The force of the impact jolted passengers forward, some hitting their heads against the seats in front of them. Oxygen masks didn't deploy, but a sudden sense of panic set in as the aircraft skidded along the tarmac, flames erupting from beneath. The cabin crew immediately sprang into action, their training taking over as they prepared to evacuate more than 300 people from a burning aircraft. Outside, thick black smoke billowed into the air, visible from miles away. The right engine had detached upon impact, leaving a gaping hole beneath the wing where fire had already begun consuming the fuselage. The aircraft came to a halt with its nose slightly tilted upward, resting precariously on the runway. Emergency crews at Dubai International Airport were already racing toward the wreckage, sirens wailing as fire trucks sped across the tarmac. Every second counted. Inside the cockpit, the pilots, still in shock from the failed landing attempt, were now fully aware of the catastrophe unfolding around them. They followed emergency procedures, shutting down the remaining engine and calling for an immediate evacuation. In the cabin, flight attendants struggled to maintain order as passengers scrambled to unfasten their seatbelts, some frozen in fear while others instinctively reached for their belongings. The senior flight attendants moved quickly, shouting instructions over the growing noise of crackling flames and the escalating panic of those on board. "Leave everything behind. Move to the exits," they commanded, their voices cutting through the confusion. Smoke had begun seeping into the cabin, making visibility difficult. The acrid scent of burning fuel filled the air, making it harder to breathe. Despite the rising tension, the crew remained calm, ensuring that passengers moved in an orderly fashion toward the emergency exits. The forward and middle exits were deemed safe, and the inflatable evacuation slides deployed immediately. One by one, passengers began sliding down, some landing hard, others tumbling, but all desperately trying to escape the inferno behind them. Many were disoriented, some stumbling to their feet, looking back at the aircraft in disbelief. Outside, the fire crews had reached the wreckage and began dousing the flames with powerful jets of foam and water. Their mission was twofold: suppress the fire and ensure the safety of those still inside. Despite their rapid response, the heat from the blaze intensified, making it nearly impossible to control the spread. The aircraft structure, designed to withstand extreme conditions, was beginning to succumb to the inferno. Back inside, some passengers hesitated, reluctant to leave their personal belongings behind. Laptops, passports, and bags were clutched tightly, slowing the evacuation process. Flight attendants grew more urgent in their commands, pushing people forward. Time was running out. A woman carrying a young child hesitated at the exit, her fear overriding her instincts to jump. A flight attendant, without a second thought, grabbed the child and helped the mother down the slide. Moments like these highlighted the professionalism and bravery of the crew, who were risking their own lives to ensure everyone got out safely. As more passengers reached the ground, emergency responders directed them away from the aircraft, fearing an explosion. Some turned to capture the moment on their phones, oblivious to the dangers still present. Amid the controlled chaos, one firefighter, a first responder determined to save as many lives as possible, entered the burning wreckage in an effort to ensure no one remained inside. With smoke thickening and visibility near zero, he worked tirelessly to search for any stranded passengers. Tragically, in his heroic efforts, he lost his life, a stark reminder of the dangers emergency personnel face in their line of duty. As the last flight attendants exited the aircraft, verifying that no one remained inside, a final explosion sent a fireball into the sky. The heat was unbearable, forcing everyone further away. The aircraft was now fully engulfed, its aluminum skin warping under the intensity of the flames. What had once been a state-of-the-art Boeing 777 was now a smoldering wreck, the aftermath of a landing gone horribly wrong. Passengers and crew stood together on the tarmac, shaken but alive. They had survived one of the most terrifying moments of their lives, escaping just in time. Airport authorities moved swiftly to assess the situation, providing medical assistance to those injured. Some passengers suffered minor burns and bruises, while others were treated for smoke inhalation. But remarkably, every soul on board had made it out alive, a testament to the quick thinking of the crew and the efficiency of emergency responders. As the smoke finally began to settle, the reality of what had happened sank in. The investigation into the cause of the crash would soon begin, but for those who had just lived through it, the only thing that mattered was that they had survived. Their journey, which had begun as a routine flight, had ended in a way none of them could have ever imagined. The scene on the tarmac was surreal. Passengers, still in shock, stood in small clusters, some comforting one another while others stared in disbelief at the burning wreckage. The heat radiating from the fuselage was intense, forcing everyone farther back as emergency responders continued their efforts to contain the blaze. The smell of burnt fuel and melted metal lingered in the air, mixing with the distant sound of sirens and radio chatter from rescue teams coordinating their next steps. Many passengers were still processing what had happened. Moments ago, they had been preparing for a routine landing, expecting to disembark normally. Now, they had escaped a burning aircraft, some with minor injuries, others simply overwhelmed by fear. Some people had lost shoes in the frantic evacuation, others had scrapes and bruises from their desperate slide down the inflatable chutes. A few clutched onto loved ones, whispering words of reassurance. Parents held onto their children tightly, still shaken by how close they had come to disaster. Medical teams moved quickly through the crowd, assessing passengers for injuries and signs of trauma. Paramedics checked for smoke inhalation, offering oxygen masks to those who had struggled to breathe during the evacuation. Despite the confusion and fear, there was an overwhelming sense of relief. Everyone on board had survived. The flight attendants, who had played a critical role in ensuring order during the escape, now focused on assisting emergency personnel. Some comforted passengers, while others helped responders account for everyone. They had trained for scenarios like this, but experiencing it firsthand was something no amount of preparation could fully replicate. The responsibility they had carried in those chaotic moments was immense, yet their swift actions had prevented greater tragedy. Airport officials and airline representatives arrived on the scene, working to organize transport for survivors. Buses were dispatched to take passengers to a safe location where they could receive further medical attention and begin the process of reuniting with loved ones. Authorities set up a temporary shelter within the airport, providing water, blankets, and medical support. Counselors and psychologists were on standby to help those struggling with the emotional aftermath. Despite the rapid response, tensions remained high. Some passengers frantically searched for their belongings, only to be reminded that material items could be replaced, lives could not. The reality of losing passports, luggage, and personal valuables paled in comparison to what could have been lost. Yet, amid the relief, there were moments of frustration and disbelief. People questioned how something like this could have happened. Others remained silent, still too overwhelmed to process their emotions. Airline officials soon began the process of gathering statements from passengers and crew. Investigators needed first-hand accounts to piece together what had gone wrong. Survivors described the final moments before the crash, the sudden jolt as the aircraft slammed into the ground, the terrifying sight of fire spreading across the cabin windows. Some recalled hearing the urgency in the crew's voices, their repeated instructions to leave everything behind and evacuate immediately. Every detail mattered, and investigators were determined to understand exactly what had led to the near catastrophe. As the hours passed, the fire was finally brought under control, though the wreckage of the Boeing 777 remained on the runway, a stark reminder of how quickly things had spiraled out of control. Charred remains of the fuselage, melted engine components, and twisted metal told the story of a plane that had come dangerously close to a far worse fate. For those on board, the experience had been life-altering. Some passengers expressed their gratitude toward the crew, acknowledging that their calm and decisive actions had saved lives. Others, still shaken, struggled to put their thoughts into words. Every person had reacted differently in those critical moments. Some had followed instructions immediately. Others had hesitated, frozen in fear. But in the end, all had made it out alive. As night fell, Dubai International Airport began returning to normal operations, though one runway remained closed due to the wreckage. Flights had been delayed, diverted, or cancelled, creating a ripple effect of disruptions. Yet, amid the logistical challenges, the focus remained on the survivors. Emirates representatives assured passengers that their immediate needs would be met, arranging hotel accommodations for those who needed them and facilitating onward travel for those who wished to continue their journeys. News of the crash had spread quickly, making headlines worldwide. Families of passengers anxiously awaited updates, some calling loved ones repeatedly until they received confirmation of their safety. Social media was flooded with images and videos captured by witnesses, footage of the burning aircraft, plumes of smoke rising into the sky, and survivors recounting their ordeal. Aviation experts and analysts began speculating on what might have gone wrong, but the official investigation had only just begun. In the coming days, authorities would examine every aspect of the flight, from the pilot's actions to the mechanical systems of the aircraft. The cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, often referred to as the black boxes, would provide crucial insights into the final moments before the crash. Investigators would review air traffic control communications, weather conditions, and the aircraft's maintenance history. Every possibility had to be considered. For now, the passengers and crew of Emirates Flight 521 were left to process what had happened. Some vowed never to fly again, too shaken by the experience. Others viewed their survival as a second chance, a moment that had changed their perspective on life. Regardless of how each individual coped, one undeniable fact remained: they had come terrifyingly close to disaster, and yet, against all odds, they had survived. In the days following the crash of Emirates Flight 521, the focus shifted from survival to understanding what had gone wrong. Investigators from the UAE's General Civil Aviation Authority, along with representatives from Boeing and Emirates, began meticulously analyzing every detail. The wreckage, still sitting on the scorched tarmac, served as a haunting reminder of how quickly disaster had nearly unfolded. With every passing hour, new pieces of the puzzle emerged, bringing clarity to the chain of events that had led to the accident. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were recovered and sent for analysis. These devices held the key to the final moments before impact, capturing the pilot's conversations, the aircraft's response, and any system alerts that may have gone unnoticed in the chaos. It wasn't long before the findings confirmed what experts had suspected. During the attempted go-around, the thrust levers had remained at idle, depriving the aircraft of the power needed to climb. Instead of regaining altitude, the Boeing 777 lost speed and came crashing back down. This revelation raised questions about training and decision-making in critical moments. The go-around maneuver was a routine procedure, one that pilots were well-versed in. Yet, in this instance, something had gone terribly wrong. The investigation concluded that the pilots had not advanced the throttles manually, assuming the aircraft's automation would do it for them. The absence of thrust at such a low altitude had left no room for recovery. Emirates responded swiftly, reinforcing training protocols to prevent such errors from happening again. Meanwhile, passengers and crew members attempted to move forward from the experience, though the memories of that fateful day remained vivid. Some sought professional counseling to cope with the trauma, while others found solace in the gratitude of simply being alive. Survivors shared their stories with family, friends, and the world, recounting the fear, the urgency, and the overwhelming relief when they had finally stepped onto solid ground. For the flight attendants who had led the evacuation, the experience was both a testament to their training and a reminder of the immense responsibility they carried every time they stepped onto an aircraft. Their voices, firm and unwavering in the face of panic, had guided hundreds to safety. Their actions, from instructing passengers to leave belongings behind to physically assisting those who struggled, had made the difference between chaos and an orderly escape. They had been the last to leave the burning jet, ensuring that no one was left behind. Among the heroes of that day, one name stood out: the firefighter who had lost his life in the rescue operation. His sacrifice was honored by the aviation community, his bravery recognized by those who owed their survival to his efforts. His family, devastated by the loss, found comfort in knowing that he had given his life to save others. A ceremony was held in his honor, a solemn reminder of the dangers faced by those who rush toward danger when others are running away. As time passed, the scars of the accident remained, both physically and emotionally. The aircraft itself was beyond repair, its remains eventually cleared from the runway after weeks of investigation. Yet, the lessons learned from the incident continued to shape aviation safety. Pilots around the world studied the case, reviewing the importance of manual intervention in critical situations. Airlines reinforced training programs, emphasizing that even the most advanced aircraft required human oversight in moments of crisis. For the passengers of Flight 521, life carried on, though many would never forget the moments that had tested their resilience. Some avoided flying for months, even years, before finding the courage to step onto another plane. Others, having faced the fragility of life so closely, found a renewed appreciation for every moment. The experience had changed them, each in their own way. Emirates, one of the world's leading airlines, took the incident as a humbling reminder that perfection in aviation was a continuous pursuit. They invested further in pilot training, ensuring that situations like this would never occur again. The crash of Flight 521 became a case study in flight safety, a moment that, despite its terrifying nature, contributed to the ongoing evolution of air travel. In the grand scope of aviation history, the accident was one of survival rather than tragedy. It served as proof that preparation, quick thinking, and teamwork could save lives even in the face of disaster. Though the aircraft was lost, no passenger perished, and every individual who had been on board that day had walked away with a story of survival. For those who had been there, the sight of flames consuming the jet, the sound of urgent commands, and the feel of the hot tarmac beneath their feet would never fade. Yet, alongside those memories was something more profound: the realization that life could change in an instant and that survival, against all odds, was a gift to be cherished. In the end, Flight 521 was not just a story of a crash, it was a story of resilience, courage, and the enduring will to live.